Okay, welcome to this tutorial on how to do some basic animation. In this tutorial I'm just going to go through the steps to make this particular character here do a very basic walk. I'm not going to focus so much on the artistic merit of the walk, but more on the technical application and how to use Maya to generate walk cycle using keyframes. So let's get started. Okay, stop. So I'm just going to reset the interface and load up the file I'm going to use. So file, use the files, oops, only, and I will have this file linked in the information section of this video. And let's reset the interface, your elements. Show all. So this might be a typical interface arrangement you might be having in your particular Maya. When it comes to animation, you don't really need many of these menus visible. You only need the time slider and the range slider and the channel box. And if you don't remember your shortcut keys for move and rotate, which is W and E respectively, you don't need the toolbar either. So I'm going to go and switch off a lot of this stuff. So under window, display, view elements, I'm going to switch off a lot of this. So status line I don't want, shelf I don't want, time slider I do want, range slider yes, command line no, help line no, toolbox no. And I'm going to leave the attribute editor on and the channel box as well, and just close this. And to hide the menu here, just Control M and get rid of that. So I can put my shortcut key from up here. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing of note is the time slider. By default, time slider and range slider appear at the bottom, and it's set up to start from frame 1 and end at frame 24. Of course, the range is set up to a maximum, set up to a maximum of 48, and the range is set up to 24. We can increase the range on the time slider by sliding our range slider down the bottom here to give us our maximum value. So I'm going to take this all the way to frame 48. If you don't have frame 48 at all, you can actually input values directly into the boxes here to get this. Another thing to do is to right click the time slider and just double check to see if your playback speed is set to real time. More than likely it is set to play every frame, but real time is what we want, and real time is set up at 24 frames per second. Okay, so let's get started. So initially we'll be doing a lot of the animation from the side view, and then just previewing it in the perspective view when required. So I'm just going to go spacebar and click over here to the right, in the middle with the Maya logo is, and choose side view, like so. Okay, so I'm just going to start by grabbing the first leg, or the controller here, and with the move tool, W, I'm going to move it forward and rotate it into a position like so. Okay, so we need to set its position at a point in time. We didn't really talk about this yet, but essentially the time slider at the bottom you can scrub back and forward to a particular time. We want to start a first part of animation on frame 1, so we should scrub the timeline to frame 1 here on the left, and with the object selected, so this controller here, I'm going to press S on the keyboard. Press S on the keyboard, it's going to set a keyframe. This is evident in a couple of different ways. First, you'll see a red tick appearing on the time slider, indicating a keyframe has been placed at this point in time. And also, you will notice that the controller up in the channel box here now has the channels now highlighted red, which is basically corresponds to the tick on your timeline. It's basically is saying that these values at this point in time are being stored here. That's it, essentially. Okay, so the animation we're going to be doing is a simple looping walk cycle. The character itself is going to walk on the spot. This is typical of game animation, and I'm not going to attempt to make it walk or traverse distance or translate. You can attempt to do this. There are other video tutorials to do this on YouTube. This one's just going to concentrate on some of the technical attributes of animating. So anyway, we're going to do this for a looping walk cycle. So back to my side view. That means that when I press play now, you can see the time slider going all the way to frame 48 and then starting again at frame 1. So basically what that means is our last frame is going to have to be our first frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to my last frame and press S to set a keyframe. So what that means is that the last frame is going to equal the first frame. So when the time slider loops as it plays, we're going to get a nice clean looping walk cycle. Okay, so we've set the key for the first part here. I'm going to set the key for the blue foot here. So its position is the opposite, essentially. So I'm going to start the walk cycle out with the legs spread apart, as if it was midway through a walk. And I'm just going to set a keyframe, something like this. If it rotated and translated into position, press S. And again, I'm going to set a keyframe at frame 48 to store that final position as well. Okay, so grabbing my red leg now, let's look at reversing it. So half the cycle, or 24 frames, is going to be with one leg leading, and then the other half, final 24, will be with the other leg leading. So this would be the red leg is leading first for the first part of the cycle, and then the blue leg will lead in the other, or the latter part of the cycle. So the transition is about frame 24. So what I'm going to do is position the red leg pretty much in the identical orientation and position of the blue leg, and this is at frame 24. I'm going to press S. And if I press play now, Maya will be interpolating between the two keyframes, or the three keyframes in this case. So it starts at the initial position and then comes back and then rotates forward to the original position just before it cycles through to the beginning of the timeline. So this is essentially the meat of Maya's animation system, and a couple of keyframes are only required to generate some movement. So Maya takes care of the rest. Alright, so we're going to flick to the side view and look at repeating this on the blue leg. So frame 24, I want to position this forward here and rotate it and position it. However, I don't know the exact position since my red leg has moved. So essentially I'm going to be mirroring the animation across to the blue leg from the red leg. There are tools you can get for this. If you get Maya's bonus tools, this can be done automatically. But I'm going to look at the existing set of tools in Maya to help us to achieve this by standard. So what I can do is switch on what's called ghosting. So I'm just going to select the red animated foot or leg here, go to my attribute editor, and essentially I'm going to look for, under the transform, I'm going to go down to the display, and in here there is an option for ghosting information, and I'll switch it on. And is it working? switch it off. Let's try my shape instead. So object display, ghosting information, ghosting. Is that working? Oh, there we go. So it is ghosting. Just need to double check if my original using the transform was working. No. Okay, so this definitely only works on the control shape at this stage, which makes sense because it's the shape we want to ghost, not so much the transform. Let's switch on the ghosting and just reset it to its global preferences so we can see what's going on. So, zoom in here. So with the ghosting on, you can see it basically showing the shape that we're animating, which is the controller, and going through its various positions. The green one here is its current position, and we can see the leading and the trailing positions of this shape. So it sort of tells us where it's going. It's kind of handy. So I'm just going to go into the settings for ghosting. Change my global preferences. I'm going to change it to keyframes. And what this will do is I have 3 keyframes. One at the beginning, one at the end, and one at 48 frames a second. So it's showing me those position of this shape at those particular keyframes. So if I go to frame 24, actually I'll just grab my blue leg, go to frame 24, I can happily rotate and move this foot into position, and using the ghosted shape from the red leg, I can then position the blue leg fairly accurately. So I press S, and now I have a mirrored animation across this guy. Good stuff. So go to my red leg and I'll switch off ghosting. I don't need it anymore at this stage. So we have essentially blocked out the most basic aspect of the walk cycle. Yeah, it looks pretty crap, but this is where we start to build from here at this stage. Okay, so let's look at adding some more detail onto it. Next, I'm just going to rotate the hip controller here. So this is my hip controller. I'm going to rotate it in the y-axis as the walk is sort of happening. So as the leg swings forward, the red leg, I want it to be sort of twisted forward a little way. So let's just twist it forward. So let's go to the channel box and see what sort of values are put in here. So negative 15, okay. And let's just set a keyframe at keyframe 1. And let's repeat that keyframe at the last frame at frame 48. And then finally at frame 24, we should rotate this through the opposites. So this would be 15, not negative 15. And set a keyframe at 24. And press play. Okay, so what that does is rotating the hip forward a little way gives us the ability to position each leg further forward or further back in either case. The leg itself will straighten out if we don't allow for this. So the IK is driving the leg structure, will only allow us to extend the leg so far, unless of course we're using full body IK. But that's for another tutorial. Alright, so let's go to our side view and let's continue adding more detail to this animation. So essentially our red foot is positioned forward, and then it slides back to the rear, and then it comes back to the forward. So the position where it starts to hit the ground here at the front is where it should slap down on the ground under its weight. So essentially it should be positioned something like this. Okay, so let's rotate it and let's pull it down. And I can actually just chuck some values in here to do it exactly. So translate Y, which is its position going up and down, should be 0, and its rotate should be all zeroed out. And I should only be left with the translate Z position, which is its position forward. I'm just going to press S. And somewhere before the 24th frame, so here we angle it up, essentially it's lifting the heel off the ground, but prior to this, somewhere around here, it should be still flat on the ground. So I'm going to go to frame, say 16, And I'm going to plug in a 0y value here, and also 0 out my x, and press S. Okay, so our foot is not touching the ground correctly. So it slaps down probably a little bit too fast. In this case, maybe the angle of the foot, I can slow this down. I can actually move one of the keyframes. So keyframe where the foot hits the ground like so. If I shift left click, I can highlight it, and then with the middle mouse button I can drag it back and forth along the timeline. So I can actually change its position and slow it down a bit. So the distance between this keyframe and this keyframe determines how fast something will happen. If they're closer together, this motion will happen quicker. Okay, so if we play it back, we can see that our foot is not really planted on the ground properly, and it's not looking very good at all. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce the graph editor to help us cure this problem. So essentially what I want to do is I want to move this down, the hip control, so that when we're at this frame, actually I should better animate that. I don't want to introduce a graph editor yet. Let's just animate this. So at frame 4, when it hits the ground, or 6, I'm going to animate it down slightly so the knee is bent. And just before his foot lifts off the ground, I'll also pull it down. So it's going to be better actually. Okay, let's continue with the foot. So when the foot comes forward, essentially what I want to do is lift off the ground. So I'm just going to rotate it, pull back slightly, and just set a keyframe between frame 24 and 48. So the leg will lift off the ground. So I don't like these hips. I'm going to delete these keyframes off the hip from now until I finish off the legs. So to delete keyframes, you can shift right, or you can just right click it actually and hit delete, and it'll delete it. So I'm just going to delete these 2 keyframes for now, because I will come back in there and fix it up later. So let's just stick with the legs and get that done, and then we'll come and fix the rest later. Okay, so let's repeat this on the blue leg. So the blue leg lifts off the ground in the first part of the cycle, so we should do this straight away. So it's at frame 12, let's rotate it and position it like so. Because we don't know really, we want it to sort of match the red leg. So what I can do is I can go into here, go into my attribute editor and switch on my ghosting, where I'll see the keyframe. And with the blue selected, I will try and match that. By rotating and positioning. Like so, setting keyframe. Okay. So switch off the ghosting. And comes forward. And of course when it hits the ground, just like the blue handle, I'm going to rotate it, so I'm going to just put 0 degrees here in the channel box, and Y I'm just going to set to 0, and hit, and it's going to also just move it back slightly. And of course here just before it lifts off the ground, same thing, 0 it out, and press S. Okay, so now our walk cycle is starting to look a lot better. can examine it in the perspective view. And now we need to start figuring out how to make it look really good. Okay, so essentially what we're working on here is our timing. And now we need to work on a bit of the weighting. So our character should have some kind of weight. So each time the foot hits the ground, it should basically have some momentum from the body, which causes the legs to compress, which is sort of what I just did earlier, but I deleted those keyframes. Look at trying to generate some believable motion here. So essentially when the foot hits the ground, the body should bob down. Okay. And when the leg is directly underneath the body here, it should be supporting the entire way. So actually our leg should be straight, or straight on. So just move it up to it's straight, and then we'll repeat the cycle with the blue leg. So when the blue leg hits the ground, I'm also going to make it bob. And when the leg goes underneath the body, we're also going to extend this up a bit. Okay. So it's starting to become a little bit more believable now. So now we need to look at the introduction of the graph editor to really start editing this and making it look really fine. Okay, so I'm going to go to bring up my main menu, Shift M, and under Window, under Animation Editors, you'll find the first editor is called the Graph Editor, and we'll basically bring this up. So, like that. Graph Editor is made up of several windows inside the main window. Two main areas is our area here where curves are graphed, which we can see. And the area over here on the left hand column is our filters, or key filters, so we can look at what's going on here. So what we're going to do first is we're going to use F key on the keyboard, and we're just going to focus our attention to the entire main hips control here. So just to explain what's going on here, we can see here in our graph here, we can see on the left hand side we have values. These are basically the values that you see in the channel box. And then we can see along the bottom here some more values, and these refer to the time, or time slider. And in fact, you can see the red line here, which is representing the position of our time slider, or our slider on our time slider there. So I'm just going to press play so we can see the red mark scrolling across the entire animation. Now, we can filter out what we want to look at here. So we have various key coloured curves, so we need to sort of examine them one by one. So let's just hit Translate X, which will filter it out. So Translate X, if I press F to frame it, we have something going on, but it's very, very small, so I'm not really worried about that. Let's go to Translate Y. Okay, here we can see where we place the bob animation into our particular upper body here to give it a sense of weighting as it takes each step. So I'm going to stop. You can see here, this keyframe here, which is the point where it bobs after the step with the blue foot, is much less than the point here with the green foot. So what I can do actually is I can select the keyframe, I press W on the keyboard, which will enable the move. I can hold down Shift and drag it to match the position. Okay, so it's looking alright. I'm also going to grab the whole entire curve by selecting it, and I can also drag this up and down if required. Okay, So there's also a bit of movement going on here. I'm not really sure what's going on. So when the red foot takes a step, it bobs forward slightly. Let's just press playback so you notice that. And it doesn't bob forward when the blue leg takes a step. So this is in the translate Z value here. So let's put that on and have a look. So here we can see it bobbing forward. So actually I should try to replicate this. So I'm going to grab this keyframe here and pull it up, holding down shift to get the bob. Also I grab this keyframe and pull it up to match the other one as well. So press play now. It will both bob forward in both parts of this walk cycle. So essentially the curves represent a couple of things. The black ticks are the keyframes that you see on the timeline, but the curve itself changes value. It will curve up, get straighter, and then curve out. So essentially this curve represents its acceleration over time. So look at another curve that's not so hardcore. This would be the translate Y. Absolutely this anyway. The first part of the curve here is quite steep. So this happens very fast. And then coming out back down here, it's not so steep. So it's actually going to happen slower. So what the curve represents is how fast something happens over time. So the curve typically will look like an S. The flatter the curve, the slower it occurs. So whenever you see a curve transitioning from into a different shapes, in other words, it's getting steeper or it's getting not so steep, this is where acceleration is occurring. So at this point here, it's accelerating faster. So it starts out slow and it speeds up till it reaches its velocity here. But this is represented as an acceleration. And here, as part of the curve, it comes out till it's flattened out here. And this is a deacceleration. And this basically point here, there is no velocity whatsoever. Okay, so that's how the curve editor works. So let's look at the walk cycle to see if we can use this graph editor, to improve our walk cycle. So let's look at the legs here from the front view. So typically, it's very robotic at the moment. The legs itself are pretty much straight up and down. It'd be nice if I could have them a little bit under the center of gravity of our object here, or our eggy character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this controller here in the left leg, and also the controller on the red leg and the blue leg, and switch to my front view. So now we've got a mess of curves here. I have in the graph editor both the left heel and right heel controllers. So I want to filter out a couple of these channels so I can just concentrate on making the center of gravity, or position of the leg, more under the center of gravity. So this value I'm interested in is actually the translate X. So what I can do is I can just highlight translate X and control select the other translate X to see what's going on. But nothing is going on. It's flat. So let's look at the right heel control first, translate X, and let's just grab the entire curve, press W, so we're in the move mode, and move it up or down. Not really sure which direction yet. And you can see if I move it up, you can see the leg moving back and forth down there. So just press S to frame, and let's keep moving it up. Framing. Now we're getting some pretty major movement. So I'm going to position it more underneath the character like so. And I'm going to grab the translate X control here in for the other leg, the red leg. And you can see how now my blue leg is positioned up here, and my red leg is here. So I'm going to grab this, and this one I will move down to roughly the same value, a little bit more than 2.5. And let's press play. So we're starting to get it more positioned underneath the centre of gravity to make it more of a realistic walk. Okay, it's getting kind of nice. So actually what we want to do now is when the foot lifts off the ground, it'd be nice to get the swing out a little way. Oops, so it's basically at this point that as it lifts off the ground, it sort of reaches an equilibrium. So in other words, it's more of a pendulum. So when it's on the ground, it's going to stay fixed, of course. But when it's in the air, it's going to return back to a rest state. So it's going to sort of swing outwards as the leg lifts off the ground. So let's see if we can affect that. So it's around frame 36. And I can do this basically by grabbing that particular key and then just dragging it up to my desired position. So around -1. Of course I should repeat this on the blue leg. Just press an F to frame. And also moving this down in this case to around 1. And this is going to give us a pendulum appeal to the leg, so it swings outwards as it lifts off the ground. And then basically the character is swinging it inwards to position it when he takes the next step. Okay, so it's looking nice. I can also tilt the foot out a little way. So let's go to the rotate handle. I can sort of swing out the foot. So it sort of rotates out a little way. It's a little bit nicer. Okay, let's go to our perspective view and see what we've got. Yeah. So it's a little bit slowy, bit floaty, but this can be fixed certainly by speeding things up, by compressing all the keys in the timeline, but the basics of the walk is coming together. So we could even improve it more if we go to my front view. Let's look at the hip control here. And I can look at rotating hips a little bit. And ever so slightly at these points. So basically, as the character puts a bit of weight on each one of its legs here, oops, going on, the body will sort of rotate a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. Okay, so let's look at the two controllers here in front of the knees. These are basically controlling the solver for the IK that runs on each one of the legs. So when you move these, it rotates the plane where it's calculated in. So I'm going to look at trying to improve this a little bit. So I'm just going to set a keyframe for both of these. Well, this one first. Let's get my front view. So essentially, set a keyframe for when it's on the ground, S, and one at the end, S, and one when it puts a foot on the ground, which is on 24. In frame 12, I can actually swing his knee out a little bit like this. So when he's lifting off the ground, it looks a lot nicer. And vice versa for the red leg. Okay, so the key at first frame, key at frame 48, key at frame 24. And so when the leg lifts off the ground, I can pull that a little way to give that knee a really cartoony look, I suppose. A bit exaggerated. So let's make it less exaggerated. Same with this one. That's a little bit better. So we can control how the leg looks and feels basically by altering some of the controllers here. So we're starting to get there. It's going a little bit too slow, but we can look at trying to make that faster in a second. So what I can do now is I'm going to add some what they call squash and stretch, which is using this control here to do more realism, I suppose, as a cartoon character. I'll just close the graph editor. So frame 1 I'm going to hit S, and then frame 48 I'm going to S as well, frame 24 I'm going to S, set a key. So basically at frame 6 I'm going to compress the body a bit, and then expand it a bit. Not so much as that though. And what I'm doing is just making it look like jello. So yeah, this is pretty basic walk cycle. There's a couple other controllers you can use to improve the animation, but as it stands I'm just doing this tutorial to demonstrate a way of technically putting a walk together. To give this walk cycle more character, or to give it emotion, this is really when you're going to apply the 10 or 12 principles of animation. And this is something that the animator needs to practice. But certainly just getting to know Maya, this should help you out a great deal. So the final thing I'm going to do is to increase the speed of the animation significantly. So I'm not using character sets on this, so what I need to do is I need to select all of my animation controllers that have been animated. So I'll just select them one by one. So that's all the controllers that are animated. And I can shift left click on the timeline, highlight all the keys. I need to go to 50 frames so I can see the handle. And I can grab this little handle at the end here. This will allow me to compress the animation. Let's just take it to like 38 frames and see what happens. So this will speed things up a bit. Yeah. So I can speed up my animation a little bit to get it to be a little bit nicer looking. Okay, so that's basically it. That's a very simple walk cycle, and it's a walk cycle on the spot. You can definitely do a walk cycle translating over space. This is totally appropriate as well. But this is typical to the games industry, this kind of walk cycle. And it works for the purpose of learning some animation in this tutorial. So that's it, I hope you enjoyed it, and come back here for more tutorials in the future.